I'm going to start this video off with a quote from the late, great philosopher Tupac. I'm looking at my notes. And still I see no changes. Can't a brother get a little peace? There's war in the streets and war in the Middle East. Instead of war on poverty, they got a war on drugs so the police can bother me. Just so we're clear, I don't think anyone should be doing drugs. They're bad for your health. That includes alcohol, tobacco, and putting foods in your body that's bad for you. But I do think it's your body, and you should have the right to choose. If you choose to do drugs, I want you to enjoy getting high without having the police come and bother you. Just as long as you're not driving or getting violent or causing any problems. I really hope you enjoy getting high.
So on the first day of my campaign, I pledged to do something that no U.S. president has done, but which every U.S. president in recent years, certainly over the last couple of decades, could have done, which is to use U.S. military force, if necessary, to address the Mexican drug cartels.
This is a horrible idea, and I'm going to explain why. We've already tried it. We sent our military down to Colombia to help them kill Pablo Escobar, and they did kill him in 1993. And all that happened was the Cali cartel took over. Then after they killed all of them, other people took over. Every drug cartel member you kill, there will always be somebody else suffering in poverty that'll be more than happy to take their place. Also, every drug dealer you arrest, there'll be someone else suffering in poverty who'll be happy to take their place. Don't we define insanity as doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result?
Who, yes, are terrorist organizations, and to solve the fentanyl crisis, which is mainly a supply-side driven crisis.
This is also a stupid thing to say. No one would be trying to smuggle drugs into our country if there wasn't high demand for it. They're putting fentanyl in drugs like cocaine, usually without the drug user's knowledge, as a way to increase their profits. Sure, but it's not a supply problem. People still have a demand to do drugs like cocaine because they want to get high.
Of fentanyl crossing our borders and killing 100,000 Americans every year. Not just the Americans it kills, but is also responsible for a homelessness epidemic in our country and broader social struggles in our country.
Because I have loved ones that suffer from drug addiction and homelessness, I learned a lot about drug addiction to try to help them. And I found out drugs are not the real problem. They are just a symptom of the disease. The real problem facing the homeless is mostly mental problems. It's completely ignorant to think that if we can prevent homeless people from getting drugs, they'll all go get jobs and get homes and everything will turn out just great. If we do somehow, by a miracle, figure out a way to prevent people from getting drugs in this country, nothing will change with the homelessness or the drug addicts. They will find other ways to ruin their lives.
Okay, that is a proper use of the U.S. military. One of the objections I've heard is that that would be a violation of international law, or at least international norms relating to sovereignty of the neighbor to our south. Well, that's why I said the way I'd like to first approach it is to support the next Mexican president to actually go in and take out the cartels. For a fraction of what we spend in Ukraine, we could help the Mexican government get out of the pocket of the cartels, which is where it's living today, and actually independently operate as a sovereign state to take out the cartels that effectively pose a threat to the Mexican government itself. Unfortunately, I think the cartels have a policy of what they call, silver or lead. What does that mean? That means silver to bribe the government officials or lead to shoot them, and they're using both.
The first person to use the phrase silver or lead was Pablo Escobar, and like I said before, killing him didn't solve our problems.
So what do we have? We have a failed narco state. And I want to be really clear about this. Under the principles of international law, the sovereign government of every nation has a responsibility to control for non-state actors within their borders who create real violations of international law, including through violence, for other states on the global map, for other nations in the global map. That's exactly what's happening with the failed narco state to the south.
I don't know shit about international laws, so he might have found a way to justify what he wants to do, but it's still a terrible idea. What he's basically talking about doing is using our military to intimidate Mexico, which is also a bad idea because whenever our military goes into combat, they just about always kill innocent civilians along with the enemy. And for what? Because you want to protect drug addicts and drug users who are choosing to use these drugs? I think the best way to solve the fentanyl crisis is to legalize drugs like cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine, and fentanyl, and treat these drugs like alcohol. You can do them if you want, but you better not drive. And then have the FDA do quality control to make sure fentanyl is not getting into the cocaine or heroin or whatever drugs. I guarantee you no drug cartel member or drug dealer is going to try to keep fentanyl out of their drugs. But if drugs were legalized, the FDA could do it.
I want to advance these ideas on the debate stage, and I need your help to do that.
I really wish I could debate him about it, but unfortunately, I'm a nobody. Nobody knows who I am. I got a better idea. Instead of debating those idiots on the GOP stage, debate an expert like Dr. Carl Hart, who's a neuroscientist at Columbia University who studies drug addiction. He supports legalizing drugs, and I don't think you're ever going to debate him because you know you're full of shit.
Many of those veterans are turning to fentanyl. How do we end the fentanyl crisis? First thing is you seal that southern border.
A long time ago, I read Pablo Escobar's biography written by his brother, Roberto Escobar, and he claimed at one point they were bribing U.S. military officials to get the flight routes and the times the AWACS planes were in the air. These were the planes back then that were used for radar. And they would use this information to help their drug planes to avoid being detected. This tells me there are people in the U.S. military who are not above taking bribes from drug cartels in order for them to smuggle their drugs into our country. So I don't think using our military to try to stop drugs from coming in is going to work.
We have enough fentanyl flowing across that southern border that is going to kill 50 times the number of people who died on 9/11, dying this year as a consequence of fentanyl poisoning in the United States. This is a fixable problem.
Like I said before, the way to fix this problem is to legalize drugs, so when people buy their drugs, they know they're getting it without the fentanyl in it.
Well, here's what I do favor. I favor medical choice, certainly for veterans who suffer from PTSD, many of whom are turning to fentanyl and then suicide. Yes, I do stand for ayahuasca, ketamine treatment, and psilocybin treatment for veterans who suffer from PTSD to have the right to choose, even if that's midway through going through the FDA approval process and not from a standard pharmaceutical company.
Now, him saying this completely surprised me, but I completely agree. I support someone's right to choose too, and I'm glad he does also. But I have to wonder, why does he only support people's right to choose for certain drugs like hallucinogens, like ayahuasca, whatever? Why not for cocaine, heroin, or methamphetamine? It sounds like to me what he's basically saying is he supports a person's right to choose, especially if they're a veteran, but only if it's drugs that he approves of. If it's a drug that he doesn't approve of, he doesn't support your right to choose.
That's not a Republican idea or a Democrat idea, but it is unconscionable that we have, I think the number is closer to 40 veterans per day committing suicide, many of whom suffer from PTSD.
I'm not going to pretend like I have the solution to the problem of veterans committing suicide. But it seems to me if you have some veterans who are mentally suffering because they experienced the trauma of combat, and say they're doing drugs like cocaine, if they get caught, sending them to prison and causing them to have even more trauma seems counterproductive to me. If there's something wrong with my reasoning, could somebody please point it out to me? Vivek Ramaswamy, as long as these people aren't doing anything dangerous like driving or causing any problems or getting violent, it's none of your fucking business what drugs they're putting into their system.